I finally did it. After years of trial and error, I built a storage server that fulfills all of our needs as video creators. We can edit 4K video over 10 gigabit Ethernet at the same time with multiple editors. We have enough storage, it's blazing fast, everything is backed up locally as well as to the cloud. And as a bonus, we can also access it remotely and edit from anywhere in the world. All the specs, how I did it, all the brands that I used to make this stream work, I will tell you after the intro. My name is Damien Cooper and welcome to Monkey Pixels. This video is going to be a little longer than all of our other videos because I'm trying to go into as much detail as possible on the hardware as well as on the software side. So I will tell you all the software that we use to ingest footage, how we use it to back up our footage, as well as all the hardware parts that are needed to make this stream work. So without further ado, let's start with what I actually built and what were my requirements. So why even build a storage server in the first place? We have some pretty huge projects that span over years sometimes. So we need to access huge amounts of footage at the same time with multiple editors. And then on top of that, we're doing YouTube. So we also need to have access to a lot of previous videos so we can use the B-roll and examples of some commercial work or even our own passion projects to incorporate into these YouTube videos. So ideally, we would like to have a centralized storage solution where everybody can access footage and even edit off that storage solution at the same time and not have to walk around with physical hard drives and try to find footage and exchange footage just locally and trade it between different editors. If you're mostly doing small commercial work projects, you're shooting music videos, or you just shoot a testimonial for one of your clients and the entire project fits on 1 4TB or even 2TB external SSD, then there really isn't that much need for a big storage solution. As I already said, we sometimes have projects that take over a year and wrap up to over 20 to 30 terabytes. So we do need a different solution for this. Here are some further requirements. One was the noise, because I'm a stickler for loud noises in the office, and when we work here with multiple people, I didn't want to have a huge fan noise heavy machine that is sitting in the corner and making loud noises whenever you access it. So I want to have something that is fairly silent, like all of our Macs here in the office. So that was requirement number one. Requirement number two is obviously that we can edit at the same time with multiple people as well as have multiple streams of 4K video, because we do a lot of multicam sequences and then we have interviews where we put B-roll on top. And if you do that with multiple people at the same time, then you do need the bandwidth to actually support that. And this is where I failed a lot in the past. And why did I fail a lot? Because we use Final Cut, and Final Cut, unlike Premiere Pro or DaVinci, just needs a lot more bandwidth than the other editing programs. That is probably because it does autosave every second or so. So there's a lot of small package details that go back and forth between the server and the computer, and therefore you need a bandwidth that works very well with all the network protocols. Another requirement was obviously to have enough storage for us to work on and don't have to worry about having to delete or archive footage, so that all of our footage is in one location and we can access it and just don't have to worry about shooting too much. Another obvious requirement is that everything was safe and backed up, because one of the most horrible scenarios you can have as a filmmaker is losing footage that hasn't been delivered to your client yet. So I wanted a good backup solution locally as well as to the cloud. Another requirement was that it is easy to use and manage, so we don't need an entire IT department. Another requirement is also that we needed it to be expandable. So if you want to grow as a company and we want to add more storage, we can do so without having to build an entire new storage server. And another requirement as well, and that is more of a bonus, is that we can also access it from outside of the office, over the internet, even from different countries. And with our current solution, we achieved all of these points, and here's how we did it. Little side note before I tell you exactly how I did it. At the end of the video, I will also tell you about how I would have done it if I would have built the entire thing from scratch, because I didn't, because I used a lot of parts that we already had, like our external rate systems, for example. So take everything a little bit with a grain of salt, and at the end, I will tell you exactly how I would have done it, but it's pretty similar, just a couple of things I would have changed. As the brain for our storage server, I used an M1 Mac Mini, and I bought this specifically for the storage server. And I chose the M1 Mac Mini for several reasons. One good reason to choose the M1 Mac Mini as our brain was the noise, because it doesn't really produce any, it doesn't even have a fan, I think, so that comes in very handy. Number two, this computer is also very low in power consumption due to its new technology in chipsets, and I don't need to rack up my electricity bill more than I have to, because this thing runs 24/7, 365. Another good reason to choose the M1 Mac Mini over a older Intel Mac Mini is that it does feature two full-size Thunderbolt ports that are not split between each other, so you do get the bandwidth of 40 gigabytes per second from each Thunderbolt port, and they're not on the same bus, so you don't have to share this bandwidth and only get 20 gigabits per second out of each. Would I be using the M1 Mac Mini if I had to do it all over again? It depends. Maybe I would have chosen something different, but again, I will talk about this at the end of the video. Now, the core element that makes our storage server a storage server, and that is our hard drive solution. As our working drives, we use a 20 terabyte SSD RAID by a company called Arika. And we already had this one and we really liked it. There's a full review on our channel. You can check that one out as well, because it's blazing fast, it's small, and you have 20 terabytes of SSD storage that we can work on. And it's also pretty much silent. We only had one of the SSD drives before I started building the storage server, so we added another one. So now we have two 20 terabyte SSD RAIDs. On one, there's mostly commercial work, whereas on the other, there is more of our YouTube content and personal projects. On those two 20 terabyte SSDs, there's all of our current projects, as well as recent projects and everything that we need to have access to pretty quickly. Next to our two SSD RAIDs, we also have an HDD RAID, and that is from Arika as well, and it holds 54 terabytes of storage. And this drive backs up both the two 20 terabyte SSD drives. So they are being backed up all the time. So whenever we put something onto the SSD drives, we also put the same amount of footage onto the HDD drive, so we have a full redundancy of everything. All of those three RAID systems are all Thunderbolt technology, so we daisy chained them together and hooked them up to the Mac Mini via one Thunderbolt 3 port. And although all of these SSD RAIDs are blazing fast with up to 1.5 gigabytes per second of data bandwidth, one Thunderbolt 3 port is enough to saturate all three of those, and we could actually add another SSD RAID if we wanted to, and still had enough bandwidth to saturate all four of them. The advantage of having separate SSD RAIDs is that if we want to travel and we go on a job that is pretty big and we need a lot of storage and we need to work on site, we can take one of the 20 terabyte SSD RAIDs and just take it with us. We just unplug it and take it on location to edit off. And then afterwards, we can seamlessly integrate it into our storage server again and keep working from here. And this is what we've done last year when we had a 6-week documentary shot in Mexico as well as in Las Vegas. And we took one of the 20 terabyte SSD RAIDs. We worked on site for 6 weeks straight, then came back to the office, and we didn't have to copy any footage because we already had everything on our SSD RAID. Just plugged it into the server, and that's it. Keep in mind, we already had 2 out of the 3 RAIDs, and we just added onto this, and I would have probably done it a little differently, but again, end of the video. So why would I go a M1 Mac Mini storage server route and attach Thunderbolt 3 drives to it instead of getting a all-in-one solution like a QNAP, for example, or getting a rack mount server? First of all, I already had a bunch of hard drives that I could use and just attach to the server without having to get everything new from scratch, which would have been really expensive because I would have had to buy everything new just in order to copy everything over. So that would be a lot more cost intensive to set up in the beginning. And B, here in our Mac environment, just having access to another Mac just seemed way easier, and it's also so much more flexible because here I can also just share other drives via that server. I can just plug an SSD drive in or a card reader, or now we have an archive HDD that is external. I just plug it into the Mac Mini and now I can share it over the Ethernet and everybody has access to it. Also, a big point that I will mention further down the road is that most of the servers that I have tried in the past and that I have watched reviews of are really freaking loud. You usually need your own server room or at least a server rack somewhere in your office, and that for us just wasn't an option because we work and record YouTube videos here, so that would just be too loud. So now we need to connect our server to all of our computers. First of all, what kind of computers are we working on? We currently are working on 3 MacBook Pro 16-inch M1 Max MacBooks, and all of those are being connected via Thunderbolt to 10 gigabit Ethernet directly to our storage server. So first of all, we ordered our Mac Mini with a 10 gigabit Ethernet port integrated, so we already have one connection down. To add 2 more computers to our server, we attached a Sonnet Twin 10 gigabit Ethernet adapter. And that is pretty much a Thunderbolt PCIe external exclosure where there is a dual 10 gigabit Ethernet card in there, and it also features 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports, so it does support daisy chaining. So this way we can attach 3 computers directly to our server, and every one of these computers gets a full 10 gigabit Ethernet connection. I could have also done a 10 gigabit Ethernet switch and therefore just dividing one 10 gigabit Ethernet port to all the different computers, but I thought it was basically the same price and therefore I can just have a separate dedicated connection to every single one of our clients, and that just made a lot more sense to me. Unfortunately, none of our MacBook Pros have a native 10 gigabit Ethernet connection, so we needed to find a Thunderbolt to 10 gigabit Ethernet adapter. And over the years, I tried multiple brands and it came down to the OWC 10 gigabit Ethernet adapter, and they work perfectly fine. Not only are they passively cooled, so they don't have a fan that speeds up like a QNAP, for example, that I tested, which was incredibly loud, and they're also very reliable, unlike other brands that I used that just didn't saturate the full bandwidth when working with them. So I can highly recommend the OWC 10 gigabit Ethernet adapter. One cool feature of the OWC 10 gigabit Ethernet adapters is that they are, like I already said, passively cooled, so they don't need a fan. And secondly, they are also bus powered, so you don't need to hook them up to a separate power source. We've been working with these for several months now. I think we're actually going up on 1 year now, and we never had any issues, and it works perfectly fine and is, as I already said, blazing fast. When it comes to cables, I used the Thunderbolt 3 or 4 cables that came with all of our adapters, and I used 10 gigabit Ethernet cables from Amazon. I believe it's Cat 7, and I chose some ultra thin ones, so I had no problem of installing them alongside the walls here in our office. So now we have our Mac Mini. On one of our Thunderbolt 3 ports, we attached all of our storage solutions, and on the other Thunderbolt 3 ports, we attached 2 computers via 10 gigabit Ethernet, and we also attached 1 computer via the internal 10 gigabit Ethernet port. One thing we're missing now is a 1 gigabit Ethernet port to connect our Mac Mini to the internet. In order to achieve this, I attached another Thunderbolt hub, and that is completely overkill, but I already had this one, and you could have just used a Thunderbolt to Ethernet adapter. Now our Mac Mini cannot be controlled by anything, so we need a monitor, a mouse, and a keyboard. I decided to go for the cheapest and smallest footprint keyboard as well as mouse that I could find on Amazon, and I attached a 7-inch on-camera monitor that I had lying around via HDMI to our Mac Mini, so if I had to control it in the first place, set it up, then I could do so once the connection runs out, because usually I will always control the computer via one of our other computers via Ethernet and just basically control the screen, so that comes in very handy, and I rarely need the keyboard and the mouse physically attached to the Mac Mini. But again, if there's a software mistake or a hardware error, then I can also access the server directly, but this is not necessarily needed. So this entire construct is tucked away in an IKEA shelf that is open in the back, so we do have enough airflow. And yes, it does give off a little bit of a noise, but it's just a small hum and it's far away from all of our working stations, so it's really not an issue, and it's really pleasantly to have running in the office. And I'm recording a YouTube video right next to it right now, so it's obviously not too loud to interrupt either my recording or when we're working on video editing on our desks. So this was the hardware side of things. So now let's talk about the software side. All of our computers, including the server, are running Mac OS X, Monterey right now, and we don't need any additional software. There was a Mac OS dedicated server software, but I think they scratched that one and integrated everything into the Mac OS. And so far that has been working for us, so we didn't really need any additional software just to make the server work. Once you set up the correct network configuration and you have everything on the same network, you can easily find the Mac Mini from all the other computers. And what I basically just did is I took all of our different hardware RAIDs that are attached directly to our Mac Mini and just shared them over the Ethernet. So now whenever somebody wants to work off the server, they just double click on that connection, connect to the server, and now it's like they have this hard drive attached to their computer directly, although it is physically located on the server. And this has been working flawlessly for us. We never really had any bandwidth issues. We also didn't really have any connection issues. So overall, we could just work on that on the same connections via multiple people at the same time without any problems whatsoever. One little thing here that I found works the best is if none of our computers are actually using a Wi-Fi to connect to the internet. Because if you have an active Wi-Fi connection and the computer is also in our same internet circle, so the computer doesn't know how to connect to the server. And sometimes it just connects over Wi-Fi, and obviously this is not fast enough. So what we did is we shared the internet from the Mac Mini through the Thunderbolt ports to all of our computers. So now we can turn off the Wi-Fi on our computers and the internet is being shared. Not only is the internet faster that way, but also there is no miscommunication between our computers and the server, and we will always directly connect to the server via 10 gigabit Ethernet. So now let's talk about our footage ingestion process. First of all, I wanted to attach all of the card readers directly to the server and then have this act as a footage ingestion station, but I found it more convenient to attach all the card readers directly to my laptop and then just go from there and copy everything via Ethernet. And since the Ethernet bandwidth is so high, it's actually higher than the ones on the SD cards as well as our CF Express card readers, there is no bottleneck either, so I just do this from my laptop and copy it over via the Ethernet to the server directly. And here I use a software called Hatch, and that is a software that verifies all of our copying process, because sometimes you do get some bad copying corruptions when doing this manually via the Finder. So I go through the process of using Hatch because that just gives me a little bit of a better feeling. And the way I do it is I will take all of the footage from my SD or CF Express card and copy it over to the SSD RAID to a separate location. And then I do the same thing again from the SD cards directly to our backup RAID. And therefore, this is the much better way than doing it to copy everything over to one of the hard drives and then copying it over from the hard drive to another hard drive. Because if you might be missing something, or if there would be a corrupted file on the way from our SD cards to the RAID, then I would just copy that corrupted file over to the backup. So always copy everything from the card directly to your working location as well as the backup location. So now we have all of our footage and all of our files redundant, because we have all of our working files on our current working drive as well as on the backup drive. We also have our libraries on our working drive, and the backups are always automatically stored on our local computers. So that is obviously a great way of preventing failure from our hard drives. But what if the building burns down or we get robbed and all of our stuff gets stolen? Then everything is gone regardless. No, it is not, because we have everything backed up in a cloud as well. The way we do our cloud backup is via Dropbox. I already have a Dropbox Unlimited business account that I use to share all of our files with our clients. And since I already have that unlimited Dropbox business account, I have unlimited space to upload all of our footage to the cloud. And here I just use the internal backup function of Dropbox and I just upload the entire hard drive to the cloud. That obviously takes weeks over a common internet connection to upload terabytes over terabytes onto the cloud. But once you've done this, then it only does incremental backups, meaning that whenever we add something new to that hard drive, it only copies over the new files and everything is backed up in the cloud. The last software we use to make this entire thing work is Parsec. And Parsec is basically a screen sharing technology software that allows us to share our computers via the internet. And this is originally made for gaming, but it works very well for video editing as well. Since the M1 Mac Mini is not the fastest computer here, we basically have that tool on the computers that are locally here in the office. So if I'm out and about and I'm in a different country and I need some quick changes to be made for some clients and nobody else is here in the office to do it for me, I can remote control one of the computers that are here in the office, and since these computers are attached to the server, I can just remotely work on that computer and the server and have access to all of my files over the internet from wherever I am in the world. So this is how we build this storage server, and I am really happy with it and everything works just as it should be. Would I do it all over again the exact same way if I had to build it from scratch? No, I would not. So here are the things that I would change. Number one, instead of getting small separate SSD RAIDs, I would probably just get one bigger. Instead of two 4-bays, I would probably get one 8-bay or even a 12-bay, so that we can just saturate them all with SSD RAIDs and don't have to choose between two different RAIDs. So we have one centralized storage location where everything is being stored on. I would also replace our 54 terabyte HDD RAID that only holds 4 bays of hard drives and replace it by its bigger brother, the 12-bay version. The cool thing about the Eureka RAID is that you don't have to start out with a full pack of hard drives in it. You could just start with 4, 5, or 6 drives and then gradually add more drives when you need the space. Again, this is more future-proof, but we already had these RAIDs in place, and eventually I might have to replace these with the bigger version, but right now we still have storage left. But with 12 bays in a RAID 6 configuration, we could go all the way up to, I think, 180 or even over 200 terabytes of storage, and that will probably last us half a lifetime. The last thing I would probably change if money were no object is I would replace the M1 Mac Mini with a Mac Studio, because A, we do have more ports and I could just install the remote software on the M1 Mac Studio itself and then remotely work off that server itself and don't have to go the route through another local computer in the office, and therefore I have a really powerful server that I can also work off. Again, for just using the storage server, the M1 Mac Mini with its 16 gigabytes of RAM and its base CPU is totally fine and works for everything we need as a storage server. But if you do want to edit off that server itself, then we might need something stronger. So there you have it. This is how I built our M1 storage server, and I'm really happy with it. If you want to tackle a similar project, but you have unanswered questions that I didn't answer in this video, then shoot a comment down below and I'm trying to answer as soon as possible. And if you like this video, then please give it a like because it really helps the channel grow. Subscribe for more. And while you're already here, check out the 2 reviews of the SSD RAID and the HDD RAID. I will link them up here, and I hope to see you on the next one.